First of all, what in the hell was that music on that intro? Hey guys, Rick Shew, friends from work. I've got Jim Taylor. Let's chat.
Get down.
Got a little music there from my good friend Freak Bass. Thank you, sir. Jim Taylor, what is up?
Rick, how are you, man? It's good to see you.
Likewise. So you and I have been talking on LinkedIn now for quite, I don't know, 6 months?
Probably something like that, yeah.
Yep. So before I just jump into this, why don't you tell your consultant, author, tell the audience here who you are, sir.
Yeah, my name's Jim. I'm a lifelong hospitality person. I've been in restaurants my whole life. It's so funny when you see the author thing and all that stuff, right? I mean, I'm a restaurant guy. I always joke with people that I started my first experience in hospitality was as a 12-year-old when my dad was like, come here for a second. I'm going to show you how to open this wine bottle so you can help us speed up drink service at our Christmas party.
Oh,
right?
nice.
And that was my first sort of.
Was it a cork?
Yeah. Put it between your feet and pull.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't had me do it sooner if I was strong enough when I was younger, right?
Because in those days, anything you would screw was cheap wine. It's not like that now, but yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so that was my introduction to hospitality, was just, hosting the party and making sure people were having fun and that kind of thing. And I haven't left. I've been in restaurants my entire life. So now do all kinds of stuff, try to help restaurants make more money. We have a restaurant ourselves. We try to give away as much advice and content and stuff about how to run a good business in the restaurant industry as possible, and that's what we're doing.
So the thing I love about you actually is, let's face it, social media has a lot of grifting going on, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, it's weird. I didn't realize how that permeated so much on that app, but it does. Yeah. And when I started noticing your post and I would read through them, the first time I knew that I admired you was when I went, shit, that's a great idea. Because I've been an owner operator, or at least an operator director for, I don't want to age myself, but my first restaurant job was waiting tables in 1990. Well, actually making pizzas at Little Caesars Pizza in Mesquite, Texas, when I was 16. And then I waited tables when I was 18. That's because in Texas, that's when you can serve alcohol. Mm-hmm. And I've never stopped. And that was in 1994. So do the math. And so when I saw that, I just want to give some context here that I know what I'm talking about. I know the business. And I went, this guy knows what he's talking about. And that was neat because there's 50 things on my feed. I'm going bullshit, grifter. And then, whoa, Jim. So tell us, okay, when you and I were messaging, I was saying, I really want to kind of take a dive into your journey and where you are now. So let's play it a little backwards. Where are you now? And then let's rewind the clock.
Yeah. So now it's funny. I mean, we'll get obviously to the rewinding the clock part, but it no matter where we go in the story, it's still about trying to take good care of people and give good service and be hospitable. Mm-hmm. And, my business now, Benchmark 60 is our consulting business that started by accident in the middle of the pandemic because some friends that owned a restaurant asked for some help. So that's obviously 5 years ago. I have a consulting business that helps restaurants optimize business model. So we help them with labor cost optimization, food cost, liquor, wine, and beer cost management, menu engineering, and pricing strategies. We help them make more money.
So I've heard you tell the story before when I was doing some research on you. I love it. So your friends reached out to you during the pandemic, which obviously that's a whole different conversation of how awful that was just around the world. But just honing in specifically on our industry, it wreaked havoc. And it wreaked havoc on everyone because things closed. It just seems like hospitality obviously got a really hard hit, which is unfortunate. But there were a lot of beautiful things that did come out of it. That's the only thing we can do in life, right? With tragedies, we find silver linings. Mm-hmm. So your friends reached out to you, and then you helped them. And I'll say this, Jim, I tried private consulting myself for a while. I'm very good at consulting. What I wasn't good at is running the business of consulting. I was spread too thin, And was it making any money? Because you can only charge so much to restaurants to do this. Because I was talking to mom and pop places, not large chains. And then it was like, okay, now I need to hire somebody. What does that look like? And I was trying to apply the same logic as just owning or running a restaurant. I just couldn't quite figure it out. So talk about that for a second. So when you helped your friend out, then how did you transition to this where you are now? And then how the hell did you figure out how to make it work as a consultant and be profitable for you?
So, we'll get to the career in restaurants part in a minute, I'm sure. But I had been working for a big Canadian. I live in Canada. I'd been working for a big Canadian national chain, big restaurant group, and I left that position during the pandemic because I was, we'll get to the burnout and all that other stuff in a few minutes, I'm sure. But I left because I needed a change. I told myself I was going to go on sabbatical because it sounded cooler than being unemployed to myself and my friends and my parents.
Sure.
And a friend reached out. Now, this restaurant, this was an independent restaurant that they were doing friends and family pre-opening type stuff a week before the pandemic hit. So they had no government support, no experience running restaurants. The woman who was running it as the general manager she'd never run a restaurant before. So here they are with no experience.
She was the GM and never run a restaurant.
Owner / GM, and she'd never been a GM of a restaurant before. And now here they are operating on takeout only. Fortunately, they were really busy. They were generating tons of revenue and losing tons of money. So there was the complexity of, this is my first restaurant that I'm owning. There was also this added complexity of all the other stuff was going on. And I thought consulting was going to be just like being an area manager or something like that, where you just go in and review the P&L and talk about systems and, away we go. And realized really quickly that that's not what it was. They were like, we need you to expedite on Friday night because we don't know we don't even know where to start. And so, that it was an interesting sort of first glimpse of what the, air quotes for people who are just listening, but consulting world was like. It's gig work. It's do for, it's step in and act like a part of the team for a temporary period of time, 90 days or something like that. So we ended up sort of saying, this doesn't work. The world started to reopen. We talked about doing ways that we could do things differently from an education perspective, teaching her about how to run a business and a restaurant and all these things. And at the end of the year that we worked together, it was really, really cool. They had $500,000 in the bank. So that was, an interesting sort of slap in the face of what a lot of consulting work was like. That sort of, you're there 40 hours a week. It acts like a full-time job. You're just trying to replace your income. And then this other one came up where someone actually reached out to me on LinkedIn based on some content and said, you've never heard of me. You don't know me. I don't know if you've ever been here before or not, but we think we might need your help. And this was a 30-unit restaurant group in Kentucky where I've never been.
And the content, obviously, that you're referring to that was up was about your consulting with your friend's place.
It was at the time, I was just talking about how to manage labor costs differently.
I see.
And we'll get to where that came from in a few minutes here. But I was just talking about what I was seeing happen in the industry and personal experience and just, trying to share value. Anyways, that example in Kentucky, to answer your question about how the heck did you figure out how to make this a sustainable thing? Well, during the pandemic, you couldn't see people in person. You couldn't travel. Yet there was this opportunity in a city I've never been to with a company I've never heard of that's asking for my help. I need to figure out how to make this work. So started delivering advisory services to them completely remote and had to figure out how to make that work with just a Wi-Fi signal, a laptop, and, away we go.
Nice. And so the 30 location group. So where did that go exactly?
So that ended up being a year-long engagement with them as well. We worked specifically with them on their, again, just labor model at the time. That's all that I was doing, was helping restaurants better manage labor because it was such a pain point, a bone of contention, a hot topic during the pandemic. You either couldn't find people, couldn't keep people, couldn't afford people, right? There was all this craziness happening with all of those things. And we don't want to dwell on the pandemic, but that's where my business focused was we're only going to help you figure out this labor model. And even on some of their locations on $2.13 an hour, we still were managing to save them tens of thousands of dollars per location every single year. And not just by cutting harder or raising prices. Like we were actually helping the business become more productive.
when you started honing in on labor percentages, cost, et cetera, was it just meant to be an aspect of the business, and then you were going to obviously incorporate things with marketing and service and perhaps even culture and et cetera, but it just sort of took on a life of its own? It sounds almost like you were consulting to help restaurants, and now you're helping people consult. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, we can get to that too. Yeah, it's evolved a lot, but the just labor cost thing. And if someone was to reach out to Benchmark 60, we got to send you a hat, by the way.
Please do.
If someone was to reach out to Benchmark 60 and say, we need some help with people development, we can't help you. We don't do that. We need you to write us a menu. Don't do that. Location sourcing, nope, we don't do that. New concept development, can't help you. We don't specialize in that. And the interesting thing about it is, I had a whole career of hospitality operations experience. And when I first started my consulting business, I thought I could help everybody with everything. Like, throw something at me, I've dealt with it, is kind of what I thought.
Sure.
And what I realized that I was doing was just kind of positioning as a generalist that might be able to help solve a problem that you have, because I've got some experience with it.
Right.
And when we just started focusing on the thing that kind of slapped me in the face about the labor thing was, all of a sudden I had a conversation with someone who works for Cisco Foods. Okay. Massive corporation, right? And they 100%. Said, oh, you're the labor cost expert guy. And I went, I am?
Own it.
Right. And at the time, what I didn't realize was that creating content and having discussion and focusing specifically on one thing that there was a major problem with was positioning by accident at the time as a go-to person for that one thing. So we built an entire consulting business remotely, focusing only at the time on labor cost management.
So my whole career has been restaurants as well, as you know. And I've been a director of operations. I've owned a few bars. I've been a general manager. I've been an AGM, et cetera. Waiter, bartender, everything. Hell, line cook. Going into sales and I have to believe in what I'm doing. So Spot On, for instance, I know that we're making a difference in restaurants. I know we are, and it feels good. I believe in what we're doing. At the end of the day, my whole calling professionally is helping restaurants. Whether I'm a director of operations, I'm walking into a place to help the GM make that location better, or whatever it may be, or I'm bartending, I'm coming in looking around and the cleanliness and the line of sight. Let's make, just, it doesn't matter what it is. And so that's what I do. And Spot On has given me an opportunity to have that in a career that's very rewarding. And my favorite sales book, because there is a sales technique, obviously, is the Challenger Sell. And the Challenger Sell to me is a way to have operators look at their operation from a different perspective, to open their eyes to new ideas and alternatives to the way they're thinking now, to get out of their myopic four walls. And when I read your post about how your labor cost and how the old school way of thinking is you got to get out of that and pivot. To me, it's the perfect example. And I've shared your LinkedIn post with members on my team. Like, this is the Challenger Sell. Jim is framing this and positioning this in a way where it's respectful, but it also has a lot of credibility because it's true and he knows what he's talking about. So talk about that for a second. When you're talking to an operator, what's the most challenging thing for you to challenge them, to get them to think differently about what they're already doing?
Well, there's this saying, we've always done it this way.
My favorite. My favorite.
And I'll tell a little story about the last few years of my corporate experience pre-pandemic. I'd been working
for this. Was the corporate in restaurants or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Corporate restaurant experience. Yeah.
Got it.
So I started with a company when I was 19 years old as a waiter, not sure what I was going to do with my career, and left when I was 40. So I stayed with them for 21 years. I had awesome opportunity to do all kinds of different things. New business development for 5 or 6 years, moved around the country, opening restaurants, doing all that kind of stuff, got burnt out because anyone who's done an opening knows what that's like.
Yep.
And for the 5 years leading up to the pandemic, we were being forced to look at the business model differently, as lots of restaurants are still now, based on rising cost and changing wage structures and all these different things. And because kind of randomly, I was tired from doing openings and had to sort of take on a new role internally in the organization. My role was to go and build a task force of some of our best operators and go and find some people from other industries that were data experts or analysts or whatever, and build a team internally to help us look at the business model through a different lens. We felt like the wages were getting to a point where we couldn't just continue to raise our prices to negate the rise in wage. Cost of goods were changing in ways that we hadn't seen before, whether that was produce cost, protein cost, fee per case for storage, whatever it might be. There was pressure. And we thought we can't just keep raising prices to deal with this. We have to find a different way. So we spent 5 years going down rabbit holes, looking at how other industries measure things like how productive a business is, or what the output levels of a manufacturing facility are, and how can we connect that to the restaurant business. So we started to look at all these different things. And what we found was that there was massive opportunity in the labor cost model, both front of house and back of house. If we looked at it from a how productive is the team, what's the workload level like of the team? If things are high, what happens? If things are low, what do we miss? Like, we started to really dive into this stuff. And so the challenger thing that you're talking about, when we get our hands on the data from a restaurant and can show them, if you, let's say you're a restaurant that does $3 million a year, $2.5–3 million a year in revenue. Okay. And you're used to looking at top line revenue, labor cost as a percentage of sales, and net profit. You know, there's lots of other line items that go in there, but there's, you know, those are pretty common things. Well, if we then apply this, let's look through the productivity filter and look at how productive your business is, even though this is something you've never looked at before, right? All of a sudden we have a score. If we can improve that score by 5% in a business that does $2.5 million, there's between $60,000 and $80,000 a year in opportunity.
It's huge. It's amazing.
So, and I literally had the first time I really realized that there was an opportunity here to help the industry was that restaurant company in Kentucky. The director of ops of that company he said to me, I've been working in restaurants for 30 years. How have I never seen this before?
Because it's the same way that we've been doing it forever. And just like you said, they say, what's the exact phrase? Because this is the way I've always done it.
We've always done it.
I've always done it. Always done it this way.
So we just really, I actually
if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. Had a discussion with someone not long ago, and they said, "Wow, like, you really understand labor." And I said, "No, I don't understand labor any better than the 20-year-old manager running the shift on Friday night. I just understand how to interpret the data better."
It's very well put. Let's hit pause on that for a second, because that is a fascinating skill to both come up with the solutions to help restaurants in that way. And I want to dive into at what point in your career did you start to realize that you had an eye for that formula? So your first job was opening wine for your parents' house party, right?
Yeah.
Did you break the cork at all ever?
Oh,
did
probably.
You get that?
Who knows? Probably pushed a few into the bottle or something. Who knows? Yeah.
By the way, I used to run high-end steakhouses, and the sommelier was busy, and I went over to do a wine presentation. It was an expensive bottle, and that thing went in there. That is an awkward, terrible feeling. Just you are alone on an island, and everybody's anyway. So what happened next? What was your next adventure? Where did you take your opening wine at your parents' party? What was your first restaurant experience?
Well, like I said, I started working at, I started bussing tables at a restaurant when I was 15, and then got a job at a different one. I worked at a pub because I wanted to be a bartender, that kind of thing. And then I started working at this other one when I was 19.
Were you a bar back at the pub?
I stayed. What's that?
Were you like a bar back at the pub?
Yeah. Just, changing kegs and, emptying spillage and stuff like that. Yeah. Stocking fridges. But I started as a waiter at the company that I mentioned when I was 19 and stayed with them for 21 years. I got into management right away. It's funny. I look back on it, and I got into management literally because I thought the bank would like it if I had a salary, and it might be good that I had, I mean, in Canada, you get employee benefits, so I could go to the dentist. Like that was my motivation for getting into management. But I realized really quickly that I enjoyed helping people. I enjoyed, elevating the guest experience. I enjoyed helping the team make more money. I enjoyed, helping people get out of the weeds and that type of stuff in the middle of the shift. And, that was kind of the start to my management thing. I got my first GM opportunity when I think I was 24, had not nearly enough experience or really any clue what I was doing, but just thought I'd work hard to get through it. And,
the world is on a general manager. The world is on their shoulders, man. Oh. People don't realize that. It's
yeah. And I look back at it and I think, okay, I just got by, I think, because I cared about the team and wanted people to have a good experience, and wasn't overly knowledgeable about profitability or any of those things. I wasn't a crazy good student in high school or college or anything like that, but I cared about the team. I cared about the experience. I wanted people to have love coming to work. I used to tell my new managers, if the staff don't love working on your shift, that's your problem. It's not their problem. So it was just always about people.
That's the culture building. Yeah. So at the top of this, when you're talking about how, you had guests in your parents' home and, you guys were serving, to me, Jim, that is at its core what it's all about. And I try to teach my staff or other staffs, like a lot of my clients, I'm a resident operator for them. I go in to help run shifts and do things. And so I feel like I have about 20 staffs, right?
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I always say, like at the end of the day, when people come in here, let's just make them feel better about their day when they leave. And we have to give great food. We have to have good drinks. But to me, I've always been so service driven, because that at its core is all it is. I like being a gregarious host. And I try to train operators to understand that, particularly in full service, but really it can be a hot dog stand. Make people feel good. And then also understand that it's a business. I'll share something with you, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. I will obviously not say the name of the restaurant, but I walked into a restaurant. This is when I was actually doing my private consulting. This wasn't with Spot On or any of the other. There's 3 restaurant software companies I've worked for. That's the only thing I've done in my adult life outside of managing, running, or owning a bar. And but I was doing my private consulting, and this crab cake comes up in the window, right? And I'm just watching. So I'm standing behind Expo and I'm just observing day one. And so I started in the kitchen. I went to the bar, went on the floor, went to the host stand, did that like over a 3 or 4 day period. Then we sat down and I was like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. But in the kitchen, this crab cake comes up, Jim. It was delicious, by the way. And it looked amazing. No doubt about it. I went out. Another one comes up, and all of a sudden I'm looking at them going, what? So I get the menu and I look, and I believe it was 6 ounces, maybe 8, but for purposes of conversation, I'll say 6. So I'm looking at it going 6 ounces. And I'm like, hey guys, is there another crab cake on the menu somewhere, like a special? Like, no. I'm like, okay, is this supposed to be 6 ounces? Yes. Okay. So what does that plate cost you? And I said the word plate. And this lady that was a co-owner said, I don't know. I think I got those plates. What was it, like $10 each? I was like, no. I'm sorry. Like, okay, you don't. I said, they said, why? So at the end of the night, we sat down. I said, listen, here's the deal. The first thing I saw about 7 crab cakes go out, and none of them, not one, were the same size. Mm-hmm. Some dude sitting at your bar, I think, got like literally a 10-ounce crab cake, and then like a 5-ounce went out. So you're going to have a problem with consistency and pissing off customers, but you have no idea what you're doing with your costs. So they're grabbing, they had it, in a bowl and the mix, they're doing this, and then they put it in they sear it and they throw it in the oven, and it divine, but no clue. And it blew my mind. And this place had been open for 20 something years. Yeah. And anyway, so we honed in on that. How, and I know you're dealing with specifically with labor. And you made it clear that all these other things you guys don't do, but share with us, obviously without sharing the restaurant name, but what's the craziest thing you've ever seen with your vertical? Can you share something anecdotal or just something that's whack? Yeah.
Well, to your point about the cost of goods side of things, we started the first 2 years only labor. Now we'll do pricing, menu engineering, and cost of goods management, basically anything prime cost.
Yes. By the way, your menu engineering post you made just last week was gold. So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, man, it was.
Well, I mean, there's so many examples of that, right? And to your point about the crab cake, we worked with a restaurant group or independent restaurant, not group. And actually, the owner said, I don't know if it's possible for me to get a cost on this one item. I said, why?
Why?
Because every chef makes it different.
It's problem
Now,
number 5.
that item just happened to be their top selling item, and they sell 10,000 of them a month.
Wait, it made it different, like ingredients, everything?
Not different
Like
ingredients, different size, similar to the crab
just
cake.
different size. Okay, make it.
But it just happened to be the item that they sell the most of. They sell 10,000 of that one item a month.
That's why I didn't think it had to be that. I was like, someone just going, I'm gonna throw tarragon at it because why not?
No.
Okay, good.
No,
Good.
just, portion size or how long they cook it or, seasoning, that type of thing, right? It's all different. So
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
You see some crazy things happen when you sort of, really dial in a menu from a cost perspective and that kind of thing. I mean, we see the very similar result happen almost every time we do a menu engineering exercise with a restaurant operator, and it's typically somewhere in the 1.5% to 2.5% drop in food cost percentage, and usually, depending on their model, somewhere between $1 or $2 extra in average guest check.
Amazing.
I mean, it's massive.
Explain in layman terms, what is menu engineering from Jim Taylor? What does that mean?
So menu engineering in this most simple form is basically we go in and we look at the top 10% of your items that sell and the bottom 10% of your items that sell. We focus on top 10 to start. What's the recipe? How much do you pay to produce it? How much do you charge for it on your menu? We'll focus on optimizing for those top 10%, and we don't even worry about hardly anything else to begin with. Because if we can improve the sort of overall and use the term optimize, if we can make sure there's an accurate recipe, an accurate way to execute, and proper pricing on the top 10% of the items that move, huge opportunity.
Amazing.
The bottom 10%, I don't care if it's written on a cue card in a drawer somewhere, it doesn't matter.
It's all these little things, and that's why what you're doing is so beneficial to our industry, because are you saving a business? Maybe not saving it from closing, but what you are doing is you're making them more profitable. And obviously everything that comes with that, that's more money for their people. It's more opportunities for them to expand if they want to. And it's just to have a business that's more profitable by not changing what I'm trying to think how to phrase this. You're not asking them to change recipes or even change the way they wait tables, right? No. It's all just about how they're looking at their data.
100%.
Is that fair?
We literally had a conversation this morning with an operator, 3 guys, and we've all heard this story before. But I joke that restaurants are the only industry that being a customer qualifies you to be an owner.
Don't even started. Right? How many times I hear, dude, I love to cook, man. I'm gonna open a restaurant. I'm like, okay,
right,
nice.
2-3 guys sitting at a bar having a beer or two. They're all of a sudden they go, we could do better than this. We should open one. Right? It's that story. This restaurant is that story. They do $3 million a year in revenue. The business has been open for 5 years. The 3 owners have never taken a penny out of the business. They've never made a dime. That's
amazing.
We did only a menu engineering exercise. We hadn't even touched the labor model yet. Only a menu engineering exercise. We had their P&L review this morning. Last year in May, they made $800. This year in May, they made $33,000.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's cathartic. It's amazing.
And that's not me trying to sound like I know everything. It's just there's a process to this, and unfortunately, a lot of restaurants don't understand that it exists.
Yeah.
Not even how to do it. They just don't know it exists.
I used to own this bar in Uptown Dallas called Nickel and Rye, and we were a trifecta, and we shared a valet with 2 other bars. The bar that was next door, and I'll refrain from using their name, maybe they're long gone, just disappeared one day. The doors closed, whatever. And we knew in Texas, your liquor, beer, wine sales are public. So you can see numbers, and then you can do backwards math and saying, okay, if they're doing that, they're probably doing 20% in food, 30% in food, whatever the math is, you can add. So, the numbers are public. And the doors closed one day, and I had the one of my bartenders like, dude, how does a place like that close that's doing 400 or 500K a month? I said, because it's not about that, it's about what you keep. And they don't know how, they weren't running a business over there. It was a shit show. And it was a good example of, you can take a restaurant that's, as long as they have a break even that's reasonable, that can be doing a $1.50 a month and make a huge profit, and a place the same structure doing 500K and not have a dime to show for it. One of my favorite things I've heard you do online is explain to those two adorable kids how to run a lemonade stand. By the way,
Yeah,
I listened to that this morning. I was like,
that was
I'm
fun.
gonna show my daughters. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I have to show her Jim's lemonade. But it's just true. Like the simplest concepts to a multifaceted 10,000 square foot steakhouse. You got to know how to run the business. It's fun to just focus on service and culture. It's fun to bullshit with the regulars and create this great environment for your team. But you're not going to be open if you don't know how to control your cost. But what was your favorite role? Did you like managing? Because I was in the 90s, I was one of the best bartenders in Dallas, Texas ever. And then I was in West Hollywood for a little while. And I thought, man, I'm never going to be as good as anything as I was a bartender. And by the way, I'm not, I'm still not, but I couldn't make a career out of it. So that was the thing I was the best at. I was the best bartender. What was Jim? What was your thing?
I think there's stages, right? But I absolutely loved bartending too. I thought it was a ton of fun, and just the chance to host people like that every day. And when you really get into the weeds, and you're busy, and you're in you're in a bit of a role, and things are flowing. It's fun. But I really, that last few years in my corporate role, where we were really dissecting the business and really trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to find a way for this business to be more profitable on the same sales without spending more money on marketing or grinding harder or cutting harder or
just raising prices
or removing a whole person from the schedule, or the manager sending the bartender home and closing the bar because they're trying to save labor. Like, how are we going to do this in a strategic, data-driven way? I love that stuff. And, now that's what our business does. So there's definitely been phases, but helping, I tell you, it's incredibly rewarding to sit at the table or on a Zoom call and have an operator meeting with their accountant that goes, okay, last year we made $800, and this year we made $33,000 in the same month. Like, nice work, guys. And it wasn't me that did it; it was them. But that's incredibly rewarding too.
Absolutely, man. Solidifies what you're doing. Champagne get popped. It's a lot of money
for them. I hope. Yeah, I mean, it was on a Zoom call, so I wasn't a part of it, but I hope so.
So, where are your clients all over? Are you
all over the world?
All over the world. So here's the question I have for you. I was going to ask you really just specifically about Canada and the US. And I'm going to preface this by I know that even here in Texas, the restaurant industry is different than it is, say, in California or New York. But what do you think the fundamental differences are? Let's just say you're in Canada and the US in terms of the structure of the industry and how it works.
Yeah. Well, the fundamental differences are, I mean, there's cultural differences. There's cuisine differences. Obviously, there's, customer expectation, all that kind of stuff. In the work that we do, there's really only one difference. And it's, what do you have to pay people in that market?
Yeah.
Right. Is there a tip credit and the tip earner wage is $2.13 in, whatever state? Or is it in Vancouver, where I live, minimum wage just went up to $7.80 and everybody makes that. So that's the only real difference. I mean, the business model is the business model.
And the tipping structure in Vancouver is the same as here, right? 20% for good service. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But and so it doesn't matter if it's a single independent restaurant in San Francisco or a safari restaurant in Kenya or a high-end place in London, England, or a pizza joint in New York. The data that we look at is the same.
Yeah. Math is universal. Why the restaurant business? I know, again, you worked at your parents, but at what point did you say, and you alluded to it at some point, but at what point did you say, this is my career? This is it. I'm in. It's in my DNA.
Yeah.
I give up. I'm in, and just kind of owned it, because most of us, I didn't, don't start off in this and say, I'm going to make a career in restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not in my experience anyway. And I'll share mine in a moment with you, but I'm curious, when and where was that moment for you? Do you know?
Yeah, it was pretty early, and there's two reasons. Well, two and a half reasons, I guess. One of them is that, I was lucky to work for a company that cared about people, was development and systems focused, and I mean, I remember having this conversation with friends and family multiple times. Why would I go do anything else? I'm having fun. I'm making good money, and I learn a lot. I'm learning. Why do I want to go learn a whole new career when I'm learning how to get better at this one all the time? The second thing is that I just love working with people. I can't just sit in one place all the time. Like, I have to be, connected to people and social. And, the real other big one was that I had a very, very positive, strong mentor that I worked with in that organization that, I mean, I've been, doing my own thing for quite a while now, and we're probably closer now than we were when we worked together. So the mentorship side of it kept me really close and motivated in that organization too, and in the industry in general.
Nice. Love that. For me, I was a young actor, theater major, and trying to be a professional actor. And obviously you bartend or wait tables. And I always used to make a joke, like, once an actor, always a waiter, And then one day I went into management, and I was an AGM/bar manager at a seafood restaurant in North Dallas. And that responsibility and learning the business fascinated me. And then doing my first successful liquor inventory. This is back, you're holding bottles up 1 point. So, there's no scaling back then, it's and you're calling it out. Right. Sure. Absolutely. And being successful in doing that, it's like, now I'm getting hooked to the business side of it. And once I was hooked culturally. And then I got hooked on the business side of it, and I never left, and I never will. If I won $30 billion tomorrow, I would be a hands-on operator somewhere, and an investor in spot on. I mean, seriously, it's just in my DNA. And when it gets in our, and when we talk to people, they're my favorite people to talk to, because it's weird when I talk to somebody that's doing this for a living and they hate it and they're burned out, but they either can't break away, or they just don't have the foresight. It breaks my heart, because it's so challenging. The hours are grueling, holidays. But man, when you love it, it negates most of that. Most of it. Not everything's perfect. But all right, let's shift gears here to, so your books, Bold Consulting, Bold Operations. So I want to kind of turn that over to you. What's the difference in your books? Obviously the title is very, it is what it is, but just kind of curious, and tell that story, please.
So Bold Operations came out first, and Bold Operations it's about people first leadership and hospitality, and how to look through a different lens. A lot of the stuff we've been talking about, how to look through a different lens on how to operate a restaurant. It's very, it's intended to be very, here's an idea or a concept. Here's a few things to consider about your business. Here's how to implement a few things and test it out and go from there, right? It's intended to be a bit of a playbook, right? Like, you can actually implement things day to day coming out of that. It was I think, we sell a few copies on Amazon and that kind of thing, but we've given away 6,000 of those for free. The idea is that this is just, let's try to give as much value to the industry as possible.
That's great.
Bold Consulting kind of came up in a little bit of a different way. So over the last few years, I mean, my business now is just over it's around 5 years old. About a year and a half or 2 years in, I found that I was meeting a lot of people just like me. That
you're saying Benchmark is 5 years old, right?
Benchmark is 5 years old.
Okay.
So I found that I was meeting a lot of people who were just like me. They'd had really, good career in operations. Maybe they'd owned a restaurant or been an area manager or VP, something like that. And either intentionally sometimes, but more often unintentionally, they were falling into consulting. And they all said the same things. It was crazy. I could have muted the call and pushed play on a recording, and I already knew what they were going to say. And it was all the same things that I dealt with when I started consulting. It was things like, how do I get away from the feast or famine side of this business where I'm working 50 hours a week in a restaurant, acting like the general manager for 90 days. And then for the next 2 months, when that contract is over, I have no income because I don't know how to find another client. Or things like, how do I price my service? Do I just take my salary and divide it by 52 weeks a year and divide it by 40 hours a week? And now I charge $80 an hour. I don't know. Where do I get that information from? It's all of that guesswork. How do you find your clientele? How do you go from hourly to retainer? All of these different things that I struggled through, they were saying the exact same things to me. So there was a couple people about a year and a half in that I just said, well, I haven't been doing this that long, like only a year and a half at the time. I don't have it all figured out yet, but here's what works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. And so I started doing a little bit of off the side of my desk mentorship with other consultants that were trying to accomplish similar things. When I told people that my average client I spend an hour a week with, and we do it all virtually, and we have clients all over the world, they were like, whoa, hold on a second. Can you show me how to do that? Yeah, sure. Here's how I did it. Like, it was very, just let me help.
Matter of fact,
what I realized was what was working for me was working for other people. One of them, he's sort of star pupil is kind of what I refer to him as. He was named to the top 100 most influential hospitality people in the UK the next year. He just took everything and ran with it. So that was kind of happening on its own. And it started to happen more and more and more. And kind of eventually I thought, okay, originally I loved being in management and operations because I could help the team and help the guests with their experience and deliver good service and hospitality and all those things. And then I got into the sort of regional management level where I was helping multiple businesses at a time and kind of acting as an internal consultant, helping the businesses within the company perform better. Then I started helping multiple companies at the same time, improve their experience, their financials, their whatever you want to call it. And now I'm kind of organically helping other consultants to do the same thing. So that's actually where I spend 80% of my time now, is working with other people who are trying to build scalable, sustainable consulting businesses for themselves so that they can help the industry as well.
It's amazing. It's amazing how it took on a life of its own and it's led to where it is now.
So Bold Consulting is all of those things packaged for those people.
I love it. In your experience, so this is client more facing versus consulting. I mean, they're clients, but you know what I mean? We're talking specific restaurant owners. 10 restaurants come to Bitchmark needing help. 10 owners, right? How many of that 10 are established restaurants and how many are NROs, new restaurant openings? Are people that are trying to open a restaurant for the first time, are they reaching out to you guys as well?
No, not so often. It's probably 8, maybe even 9 of them are, we've been doing this for a while. We're realizing things are getting harder. We know we need to either become more sophisticated to grow, or we know that we need to do things differently to survive. It's not we're going out of business and we don't know what to do, but it's kind of that, I'm the owner that has 2 or 3 locations, maybe 5. I'm small to medium independent. I realize that we need to become more sophisticated if we want to continue to be successful. And, that's a lot of the time how the conversation starts.
What if the operators are using some kind of, there's a million different ones that are out there, just some kind of software that's helping them, a labor tool or whatever. Do you get into that, or just say, that's irrelevant to what I'm doing, I'll show this, and then go back and look at, or how does that work? I'm just curious.
Yeah. We need access to some data, things like guest count and average check, and, nothing overly complicated. It's just how we interpret the data that really gets things moving. But we do need access to data. Most of them are using POS for sure. Some of them are using an inventory software of some sort, scheduling, labor cost management. Most of them are using something. I had a really interesting conversation multiple times over with several hospitality tech people. And I'm actually curious your take on this.
Let's do it.
So this was a year and a half, 2 years ago. This conversation, I found this was starting to be happening consistently. If I'm a restaurant operator and I'm using a piece of software and I call the help desk and say, I can't figure out how to find this report or onboard this new person or use this feature or whatever it might be. Can you help me? I mean, 99 times out of 100, there's a really quick solution. Yes, here's how you do it. Here's how you find it. Here's how you access it. Here's whatever that might be, right?
Correct.
What we started to find what we've started to find that there were some of the tech companies we were talking to were saying this, but more so it was their clients were saying this, was that if that same operator called back the next day and said, thank you for helping me find this report, what do I do with it? There, in some cases, was we have someone on our team that might be able to help you. In some cases, it was we don't do that. You know, in some cases, it was we just produce the report. We don't prescribe or anything. And so that's where a lot of the time, a lot of the discussion starts to happen with our either potential or current clients. Is they go, I found this new report and I don't know what to do with the information.
Interesting. So the question I was asking a moment ago, I'm going to go back to then tied into this, was obviously I knew you needed data, but just a certain software tool that somebody may be using that analyzes data different. How does that apply to you? But I think you answered it anyway. And it's interesting now tying it into this is that without getting into like a conversation about my company or our competition, it's hard not to because it's relevant.
Sure.
For the first thing I'll say is this: any great restaurant software company, by the way, I've worked for 3, okay? And we're not the only one out there, but we are one of the best. And so I'm very proud of that because there are around the world a lot. And if you're talking point of sale, in my view, there's really like 5 to 6 maybe that are really worth using. That deserve a seat at the table to talk about the differences and all that stuff. And then there's, fly by night. So many people, Jim, these days too, whether it's point of sale or reservation system, I feel like their business model is just make enough noise where Spot On or whoever buys them out. Now to go to this specific question, because it's a great question. I feel like the genesis for a lot of issues with restaurant tech and stuff like this is the onboarding process and the training to begin with. Why wasn't this person trained on how to do this at the very beginning? Obviously, it can be like drinking from a water hose. It's a lot of information that comes out and things can get dropped. But having someone that's retained it, that's checking in on the person is paramount also to success. So that's number one. Number two, you hit the nail on the head a moment ago. You call Spot On support, and our support, I'm very proud of it. It's a differentiator between a lot of our competitors. But is every person you get on the phone going to be amazing? No, but I'll tell you what, 9 times out of 10 it is. And the ones that are, what they will tell people is that's not in my wheelhouse, or whatever language they would use, but we can get you someone that can help you with that. And then they make a case and we turn it over to somebody that can help that individual with whatever that reporting question is or what have you. Also, any good tech company and again, this goes back to just a handful of us worth using. When we're constantly approving, and you can Google and you can find videos on how to do things and whatnot, and look at updates and different integrations and things that are coming, all these new features, those are companies like Spot On. We're taking revenue and we're putting it back into the system, and we're spending millions of dollars on R&D and development, et cetera. Those are the companies you want to do business with in tech. Straight up here. If it's a stagnant product that's been the same for 10 years, they don't have your best interest at heart. They're either whatever their game plan is, maybe it's still just to be bought out at some point. So I'm going off here on a little tangent. I apologize. I hope that answers the question, but yes, it's at the very beginning. And then if it's good support, they don't have an answer, just like any other thing in life, you bow out gracefully and you find out who can help that individual out. So there you go.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. That's not a knock at the tech industry or the products.
No, I didn't take it like that at all.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's everybody has their own sort of take or thought on this type of stuff. Right. But I believe that problem, that challenge, maybe not a problem, that challenge is a systemic issue in the industry in general. We've always done it this way. We've always looked at top line revenue, labor cost, food cost, net profit. Why is my profit declining? My labor cost stayed the same. What do I do with this information? There's so many different things that could be happening, right? And I was in a room with 100 restaurant operators a couple of weeks ago. I said, I said, put up your hand if you know if your sales are up or down versus last year. What do you think happened? 100 people put up their hand, right? They all know if their sales are up or down. I said, now leave your hand up if you know that what is causing that up or down in revenue, if it's cover count or average guest check. And 6 people kept their hand up.
It's
6
inflation.
out of 100.
It's high gas prices. It's always good. Yeah, right. It's
6 out of 100
yeah.
could tell us if it was driven by guest check increase or by average check increase or decrease. 94 of them were like, oh, I need to go find out.
Yeah, sure.
Right? There's massive opportunity to just understand the business model a little bit better.
So the business model isn't broken. It is how operators are running their business. I'm going to try to rephrase this better. Hold on. You come in, and it's not about the model is broken. It's that you're just not applying the right tools to said model.
I'm pretty passionate about this in a very positive, right? Want to help way.
Yeah.
And I'm maybe a little biased on it and all that kind of stuff, but we see it happen over and over and over again. And this isn't anybody's fault, right? But the business model isn't broken. In most cases, it's not even built.
I like that. It can't be broken if it's not built. Well said.
If I open a restaurant, and this happens, we see this happen all the time, where 2, 3, 4, 5 locations, been in business 20 years, no recipes.
No recipes.
Good concept, great food. They're in a good location. They're busy. They make a little bit of money, right? No recipes. But if I actually said this on another podcast not long ago, and an hour later, literally an hour after the podcast went live, we got a phone call from someone. Because I said to them, if you can't tell me, or you or someone, if you can't tell someone exactly why every item on your menu is priced the way that it is, you're just missing an opportunity.
Correct.
You haven't done anything wrong. You're just missing an opportunity.
And by the way, once you figure that out, also go apply that same logic to your bar.
100%.
Because that's another missed opportunity. Don't get me started. I train people that you've got to treat that bar like your kitchen, right? Especially when you have all these specialty drinks and all that stuff. They've got to be consistent. They've got to be priced out properly, etc. Okay. That's a conversation for another day. It sounds like in your consulting world and in my world of restaurant tech, the biggest, I say enemy lightly and to be funny, but our biggest obstacle sometimes isn't a competitor. It's not, for Spot On, it's not, NCR, Aloha, or Toast, or Clover, or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's complacency. It's just complacency. People just don't want to change, whether they're pen and paper or using an old point of sale or whatever. And I think it's the same way in your world, where they don't want to change the way they think. But man, when they do, and all of a sudden it's $800, and then what is it, 33 grand a year later? 30 grand. That is something special, my friend.
Well, and again, I'm really a firm believer that this isn't, like I said, it's not somebody's fault, right? You put yourself in and you've been there, I've been there. You put yourself in the shoes of a operator of a busy or not busy restaurant. I mean, they're grinding, right? They're working 60, 70 hours a week. They're there at midnight. They're there at 9 a.m. They're there when the toilet overflows. They're there when the place gets broken into. And then you come along and say, do you want to spend some time re-engineering your menu? And they're like, I don't even know where to start. I don't have time.
Right.
I can't,
like re-engineering, and I never did it in the first place.
Right. Like I said, it's not broken. It haven't even been built. So
right.
It's nobody's fault. The industry is a grind.
Yeah. But we can't let the grind us, right? It's our job. It's our job to control the grind. Man, Jim, this has been amazing. I want to ask you just a couple of quick more questions, and we'll jump. What's next for Mr. Taylor? Is there another book in the works?
There isn't right now. I think I really just want to continue to find ways to add as much value as I possibly can to the industry, and just really just help operators. And right now, the way that I do that with most of my time is working with other people who are trying to achieve the same thing, right? Building a really strong community of people who are trying to help the restaurant industry move forward. We also have a podcast that we're trying to just give as much value and energy and, positivity. We had a long discussion about it, that there's a lot of challenge facing our industry, and there always is, right? Whatever it might be. But there's a lot of cool stuff going on. There's a lot of wins happening. There's a lot of success stories. So I'm kind of an internal optimist and just want to make sure we're celebrating the industry because it's an amazing place.
Absolutely. And I talk about competition quite a bit on LinkedIn, and I say anybody that's a direct competitor, or you're working for a variety of different food purveyors, whatever. If you're a company and your culture is, we really believe in helping the restaurant community out, I have nothing but respect for you, no matter who you are. Even if you're a direct competitor, that to me, we're all in this together. And we'll figure out the differences and why maybe I'm a better fit for this particular restaurant than that competitor. That's fair game.
Mm-hmm.
But damn it, man, just getting people. Some of my best friends are with competition, and they care as much as I do about the industry, and I love them for it. And that's why I admire the hell out of you, man. I saw it. I believed that you were the real deal, and this is all I know. This is, I mean, other than, being a F-list actor and I wouldn't even call them B movies and D movies and local bad commercials. This is all I've ever done. This is who I am. But, well, listen, man, where can people find you on the socials and all that stuff? And where can people find your podcast? And what's the name of the podcast?
So the podcast is actually a partnership with Restaurants Canada, the big Canadian Restaurant Association, Canadian Restaurant Association. So the podcast is called Menu Unplugged.
Menu Unplugged.
And we're hosting that with them. So that's a ton of fun. The best place to find me, honestly, is on LinkedIn. We do have a website, benchmark60.com. But find me on LinkedIn. Let's connect, have a conversation. Just want to help the industry do everything that it is meant to do.
I love it. It's an honor, man. I really appreciate you doing this. Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, guys, thanks for listening. Friends from Work, let's chat. This show, as it is coming to an end. I'm keeping the same feeds. Me and my dear friend Aaron Varola are launching our new show. I'm not going to say the name yet because we're still kind of arguing on what we're calling this thing, but it's going to be a pop culture podcast. I'm probably going to launch something very specifically for restaurants. My Rick's Restaurant Tips I put on LinkedIn. But I said this from the very beginning of this podcast, is that I just want to talk about things that I'm passionate about. And there's not very many things on this earth other than my kids and maybe Batman that I'm as passionate about, maybe the Dallas Cowboys. Well, we'll scratch that one. Then restaurants and hospitality. It's just in my DNA. It's in Jim's DNA. And we love the industry. We love you guys for listening. Thank you very much. See you next time.